That's why Forrest Gump did so well in the Army, if anybody saw that movie, because they told him what to do, and that's what he did. That was his mission. I remember him taking the gun apart and all those things, and boy, what a great soldier he was, because he just did what he was told to do. And so I say to you, and this is not news to you, I pray that you know these words that I'm about to say, but I want to remind you today that your mission as a believer in the Messiah is exactly what Paul's talking about here. It's speaking the gospel and telling the gospel. That's what we should be about doing. And sometimes we get so we get sidetracked by things that seem so important to us. Whatever those things are, we can do that in a church setting, by the way. We can get so tied up in the things that we do and the events that we have and this, that, and the other that we forget that our mission as believers is to tell the gospel. Am I right? I mean, isn't that what we should be doing? To tell the gospel. That's what he said. We were bold to speak to you the gospel. He said, even in much conflict, the gospel means good news, and our mission is to spread the good news of the gospel in a lost and dying world. That's where we live. And never has it been more needed than it is today. Wickedness and wickedness just increases the more that we see. And here's my fear about the world that we live in today. And my fear is that it's likely that some of us, particularly if you're of my generation or earlier, I can remember when you listen to the news and it wasn't all about, this person killed that and this person did that. I remember the first time I ever heard of a mother killing her baby was Susan Smith, and it was in a place close to us where we grew up. And I remember thinking how terrible that is, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't wrap my mind around someone doing that. But here we are now, 25 years down the road, and it doesn't even shock us anymore. Am I right? We've become desensitized to evil and wickedness in the world around us. And I'm telling you right now, if there's ever a people and ever a world and ever a generation that needed to hear the gospel, it's the generation that we live in. Yahweh has placed us in this point, in this time, for some reason. And if part of that reason is not that we might try to go out and share the gospel with these people, then listen, we've got it wrong. Because you weren't saved to come sit in here on Sabbath and fellowship. We were saved to walk out of this place and make a difference in the world. Does anybody agree with what I'm saying? I mean, that's our mission as believers. And I said it's never been more needed, I think, than it is today. We're surrounded by people who need to hear the gospel. Take just a minute and think in your own life the number of people you know that need to hear the gospel. If you work, think about the co-workers that are with you. Think about your neighbors. Think about your friends. Think about your family that needs to hear the gospel. And Yeshua said that we're to go into all the world and that we're to preach the gospel to all of creation. That's what he said, all. And those are great big little words. Go into all the world and that we're to preach the gospel to all of creation. And why is it so important anyway? Why is it really important? Well, here's what I know and believe with all my heart. I believe that it's the gospel that changes people. It's just what I believe. I believe it's the gospel that changes people's lives. It's not Dr. Phil or the latest self-help book or any of those things that are going to make lasting change in your life, in your family's life. What it is a transforming message of the Messiah. And if that doesn't change you, nothing will. And Yeshua gave us the Great Commission, and sometimes we treat it like the Great Omission, and that's the easier thing to do, by the way, isn't it? It's the easier thing to do because it doesn't take any effort on our part not to share the gospel, right? takes no effort at all. I think that's why we've done such a good job of it, by the way. You understand? Because it takes no effort. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all of creation. Go and tell. We need to accept the mission that Yahweh's given to us, and in terms of sharing the gospel. This shouldn't be the only place that the gospel is shared in your life, I think. It shouldn't be. If y'all are wondering, boy, this ear thing is just bothering me today. This shouldn't be the only place that we hear the gospel, that we talk about the gospel, that we share the gospel. As a matter of fact, this should be the smallest place we do it. Because you know you're going to come here and somebody's going to talk about it. I'm talking about in the world that we live in your family, in your job, in where you go tomorrow, or where you report at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. Those are the places where we'll make a difference in the world around us. There's some things about it, though, sharing the gospel, that you should know and that I want to make sure that you understand. And the first thing that I want to tell you about this is we need to recognize the source of the gospel. The gospel doesn't belong to you. Paul said we're speak to you the gospel of Elohim, is what he said. Galatians 1, I think it is, where it says it's not, I didn't receive this from man, but it was a revelation from Yeshua Messiah, he said. The gospel's not a fable, it's not a ruse, it's not a collection of stories. The Bible says it's the power of God unto salvation for all who believe. That's the gospel. And it's not yours, it doesn't belong to you, you're not the author of it. If it belongs to Elohim, and here it says that it does, and over in the Bible it says that it does, then here's our obligation. If we're going to accept this mission of sharing the gospel, here is our obligation as believers. Our obligation as believers is to deliver His message. Not ours, not our opinions, not our feelings, not our emotions, not whatever thing it is that's going on in your world or in mine, but I'm talking about delivering His simple gospel message to the world. We need to keep anything out of it that's not firmly rooted in His Word, and you know, I'm afraid there's many who have made it so easy, though. It's not necessarily easy, and I'll explain that to you here in just a few minutes. We know that it's not always easy to share the gospel because there's hard truths sometimes that we need to convey. But here's what I say to you. Two things. Number one, about the gospel, since it's not yours and it belongs to Yahweh. Here's what I'll tell you. I'd tell you, don't water it down. And this is where what we see a lot of times in the world today, and it's not just today, I'm sure it has been since the first century church, but we take whatever part of this gospel message or whatever part of Yahweh's instructions that He's given to us, and whatever part of this makes me uncomfortable or might offend someone or might hurt someone's feelings or whatever, it's easy for us to take those things out and exclude them, isn't it? And again, I've said this and I'll say again, this is not an all-you-can-eat buffet where you go up there and look at it and you pick the things that you want. If you are going to share the gospel message, your responsibility is to share the message the way Yahweh said, exactly the way He said, and to add nothing else to it. Does that make sense to everybody that's in here? But boy, we make it, faith plus whatever it is, snake oil that we're trying to sell, and boy, it just causes all kinds of problems, doesn't it? Causes all. So don't water it down. And secondly, I'd say this to you: don't spice it up. Don't spice it up. Brother Reid works in and among youth. Man, pray for you. That's a tough job. Here's what you see, and because you've been there and you've seen it. Here's what you see sometimes in many of these kind of youth and young people-oriented ministries. They take the message of the gospel, which is very simple and easily presentable, and they don't water it down. What they do instead is they spice it up. And one or two, either of those things is dangerous. We don't need to take away and we don't need to add. We don't necessarily need fog machines and light shows and lasers and stuff. By the way, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, Brother Chris, if you're listening back there. But what I am saying is this: we really don't need a rock concert to share the gospel. Would everybody agree? I enjoy a good rock concert. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But what I am saying is we have to be so very careful that we keep the things of the gospel and the things of the world separate, I think. Just what I think. Okay? My opinion for what it's worth. Okay? Don't spice it up. Don't water it down. Acts 20 talks about preaching the whole gospel or the whole counsel of God. We need to do that. That means the good and the bad, in between, and the part that we don't like, and the part that we don't agree with, and the part that hurts my feelings. Those are still the parts that I need to preach to you and that I need to share, and that we need to go out of this building sharing. Don't water it down. Don't spice it up. And I said it's so needed, I think, in the world today. Turn forward in your Bible just about one page. Couple pages. 1 Timothy 4. It says, and the Spirit expressly says, in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, and speaking lies and hypocrisies, having their own conscience seared, forbidden to marry, commanded to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving. Blah, blah, blah. See, these are people who are adding all these things to you. See, these are all the things that you need to do. And boy, by the way, if that's not the world that we're living in, I don't know what is. That's where we live today. 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy 2. Both of these areas, Paul's warned Timothy about the things that are to come. 2 Timothy chapter 3, it talks about in the last days these perilous times, and men will be lovers of themselves and money and boasters and proud and blasphemers and disobedient to parents and unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, all these things. And it says they're having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people, he said, turn away. Paul's warning Timothy that there's teachers who are coming who are going to dilute the gospel message. There's teachers who are coming who are going to teach things that are heresy. There's teachers who are coming who don't understand the gospel and they're making it into something else. And boy, we live in that world today. And if you don't think we do, get on YouTube and type in anything. And there's somebody who looks like they're in a position of authority, standing behind a pulpit or sitting behind a table, spouting nothing but hogwash to you that has nothing to do with the gospel. Am I right? It makes me angry. And it makes me sad because so many people fall for that very thing. Okay? 2 Timothy 2. 2 Timothy chapter 4. He says, preach the word. Be ready in season and out. Let me tell you exactly what that means. When it says preach the word, I hope I don't have to tell you what that means. But when it says to be ready in season and out, that means whether it's convenient or not. Sometimes preaching the gospel is not convenient, but it's always necessary, right? Whether it's convenient or not, he says. So understand the source of the gospel. Source of the gospel is that it's Yahweh's gospel. It's His and it's not ours. But know this too. It can be very discouraging trying to share your faith with somebody or trying to witness to somebody or sharing the gospel with somebody because you think that they're just going to get it, and sometimes they don't. So the second thing I'll tell you about this gospel is this: not everybody's going to receive it. Not everybody wants to receive it. As much as we want them to, not everybody is going to receive it. And so, let me get back where I was at. He said that we shared this even in much conflict or in spite of strong opposition. He says we continued to share the gospel. There you go, in season and out. Whether it's convenient or not, he says we preach the gospel to you. And that's what we need to be about doing, and I pray that we are. But we have to understand not everybody's going to receive it, because some people just don't want to hear. There's a fundamental problem at work in our world and in our church, and here's what it is. It's unbelief. And it's as rampant in our church as it is in the world, I think. It's unbelief. You can tell people the truth, but they don't want to hear it. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Everybody's heard that, hasn't you? Well, let me share this with you. And I about guarantee Jason would agree with me. You have no idea what that phrase means until you pastor a church. Brother Tim, tell me. Until you pastor a church and you stand in front of people and you try to share with them, you try to invest yourselves in their lives, and you know that people are convicted by the word, and people walk out unchanged week after week after week. Not everybody is going to get it. Not everybody's going to accept it. Not everybody wants to hear it. And I say I think a fundamental problem. It's unbelief. I hear what you're saying, and by the way, this is what they say to pastors. I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, and but I'm just not ready to do that yet. Where it comes to the gospel, my granddaddy used to say old country things, and that sometimes those things pop into my mind. And here's a good one for occasion just such as this. He would say about whatever it was he'd talk about, he'd say this. He said, "You either for it or you again it." Anybody ever heard that? You either for it, F-U-R, or you're again it. I guarantee you Clinton heard that growing up here in these hills. You either for it or you again it. Some people are like that about the gospel. You either for it or you again it. There'll be some people that just want to hear, that just don't want to hear it. Yeshua talked about the wide and narrow gate. There's some that just absolutely don't want to hear it. And they're off on a road, they don't even know where it's going. And then there's some who just don't want to conform. There's some who hear the gospel, but this is what they say. They have that goat theology. I know what it says, but, this is what I'm going to do. And I can still be saved, and I can still do all this stuff. Listen to me. Yeshua said there's coming a day when many people, not 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, not a handful, not a pretty good crowd, but many people, he said, will come to me saying, "Lord, Lord, have we not done all these great things? Cast out demons." Well, we've been working. We've been busy doing just what good Christian people ought to do. We've been having programs in our church, and we've been doing this, and we've been doing all these things. And he's going to say to them on that day, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." Even in the midst of doing all those things. That is, and I've heard it said, and I believe with all my heart, the scariest passage in the Bible that I've ever read, because there's some people who think they're right, and one day they're going to find out they're not, because they don't want to conform. Because they don't want to conform. If you've heard the gospel, then you either for it or you again it, The apostles dealt with it. Paul dealt with it. Yeshua dealt with it. He was rejected by the very ones he was sent to save. You read the book of Acts and you read about Paul's ministry or any through all of his letters, this is what you'll find. He wasn't really very welcome in many of the places that he went. First few places it was recorded he preached, they basically run him out of town. But he had a reputation, remember? They knew who he was. Not everybody's going to hear it. Not everybody wants to hear it. And after 2,000 years, it's exactly the same. Here's where we are today. The message hasn't changed, our need hasn't changed, and unfortunately our opposition to the gospel hasn't changed. We're the same people that Paul wrote to Titus about and Paul wrote to Timothy about. It shouldn't, by the way, deter your effort to witness to people. As a matter of fact, if anything, it should make you do it more. Remember, Yeshua looked out and he said, "The fields are white unto harvest, but the workers are few." And what did he say? Pray that he'd send workers. You know, harvest time is kind of short sometimes. There's a window of opportunity. I think in people's lives there's a window of opportunity for sharing the gospel with them. I think that there's some people who are more, as Jessica said, more sensitive in their heart at certain times. You know, you want to see somebody who gets sensitive in their heart about spiritual things. Let somebody get about my age, somebody that ain't never been in church, probably been around church, knows everybody that goes to church. Let that person have a heart attack or a stroke or get cancer or go to the hospital and wants the preacher to come visit them, see how spiritual somebody gets. You see, here's what I know. I know for all of us there are times where we're more spiritually attuned. I've probably preached more funerals than anybody I know. I was the funeral preacher for years. That's all I did. Most of the funerals that I did, by the way, half of them at least were people I'd never met before. And it hurts my heart to think about doing a funeral for somebody, and this is what the families say. Well, he was saved and baptized in this church when he was 7 years old. And what do I say to them? I can't say anything to them about those people in that box, but here's what I can say to those people that are sitting out and listening. I can say to you, there's eternity at stake in the decisions that you make. You want to see people get sensitive in their heart, they do it when people die. You know, I heard a great gospel message from two pastors, Margie, at your daddy's funeral, and how fitting that was. And they know that people's hearts are sensitive in those times. So anyway, I'm just saying to you that we need to be aware of people's sensitivity where the gospel is concerned. And I don't know if any of that makes any sense at all, but here's what I know for those of you who are here this morning or who are listening or whatever, if you've rejected the message of Christ for whatever reason, then I have two things that I'd say to you. The first thing I'd say is this. I'd say it's nobody's fault but your own, because Yahweh's given you every opportunity, and my Bible says that it's His will that none would perish but that all would have eternal life. Isn't that what it says? And the second thing I'd say to you is this. What is so important to you that's so worth hanging on to that you would risk your eternal soul, if you will? Is anything worth it? You know. So if we're going to be effective workers in the ministry, we need to recognize our mission, what it is about. But here's the second thing I'll tell you, is that we need to use the right methods. You know, we can steamroll people where you can get the big family Bible out. Usually, I was going to say, I didn't know if there was one here, but if you've ever been in a Southern Baptist pulpit, underneath the pulpit is almost always a big old Bible, that thick, big hardback from the 1940s. When you're talking about the method for sharing the gospel, let me say what doesn't work. It doesn't work to drag that big Bible out and go beat somebody over the head with it. That never works. What that does work to do is to push people away. Okay? So what is the method that we use? Well, the first thing, verse 3, we're back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. The first thing is this: we need to be honest about it. We just need to be honest. I said let's don't water it down and let's don't spice it up. Let's say what it is. This is what it is. Here's what I can say to you. This is what this book says. And this is what this book means. And what you do with it, by the way, is your own obligation. But we need to be truthful about it. I can't tell you you need to get saved because, you know, if you do, Yahweh's going to give you the lottery numbers or something, or your life's going to be so blessed, and, you know, it's going to be. I mean, I can tell you that Yahweh wants to bless you. But I can also tell you that just because you come down an aisle for an invitation or however you accept the gospel message, that doesn't mean that you're free and clear and your life's going to be perfect from then on out. Be honest, you know. We need to be honest with people and not make it sound like something that it's not. And by the way, it's easy to see when somebody's not being honest. You know, that's the easiest thing to see. Ron and I were in TJ Maxx yesterday, and there was a fellow who walked in who was obviously a worker, who had obviously supposed to have been at work about 2 or 3 hours before. And the manager on duty was talking to him up at the front, and he wasn't dressed for work, you know, I mean, but she was asking him these questions, and this story that he told started kind of small, and I was trying not to look, you know, but it was all going on 6 feet from me over here, and so he began to tell this story about why he was why he didn't show up for his shift, and his truck broke down somewhere, and it was someplace that's closed now, and he didn't even know what time it was, and this just kept going, and I didn't know the guy, never met him, but here's what I knew. This rascal was standing over here telling lie after lie after lie. And if I knew it, I know the manager on duty knew. It's so obvious to see. Listen, when we're dishonest about the gospel, when we're dishonest about the Bible, about what the Word of Yahweh says, it's easy for people to see. We just need to be honest. We need to be genuine and honest. And we need to be living out the gospel in our life. That'd make a bigger impact than the words that we say. We don't need smoke and mirrors. Again, we don't need laser shows or fog machines. I like all that stuff. I'm not saying we can't have one, but what I'm saying is we don't need it. What I'm saying is we don't need it because we got the power of the gospel behind us. That's what we need. That's what we need. And if we're using trickery or anything else, then, you know, we're doing people a disservice. We need to be honest about the message of the Bible, and as a you know, in the capacity that I serve, to be able to stand in front of you and say words to you every few weeks, I need to be honest about the gospel, but listen to me, I need to be honest about sin sometimes too. And boy, there's where people start to get uncomfortable. And I'm not going to get off on that today. I'm just telling you, when those times come, don't feel like I'm beating you up. You know, we need to be honest about sin. We need to be honest about it because if the Bible talks about it, that's what we need to do or what we don't need to do. And why do we need to, why is it not just simple enough to take the clear message of the Bible? That's my point. Why can we not take the clear message of the Bible for what it says? Does that make sense? But boy, we take the Bible plus 5 other things, plus 6 sources and this and that, and I don't know where you're liable to end up with that. And I've told you before, I'm not that smart, and there's many things that I don't understand. But what I do understand in the Bible are those things that are so simple, so plain, so black and white, that any person with half of an intellect like me can understand what that says. Does that make sense? Those are the things that give me so much conviction, because I understand what they say. Right? Y'all still with me? Anybody out there? We don't need smoke and mirrors. We don't need all that stuff. We have to be honest. And we have to be faithful. Well, my prayer is that we'd be more faithful people. We have to be honest and we have to be faithful. Look at verse 4. It says, But as we have been approved by Elohim to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak. We need to be faithful. It says we've been approved by him to share this message, and he said we need to be faithful to that. There's a fact that the gospel in specific, and Yahweh's word in general, causes people to have a lot of conviction. The more of the Bible that I study, the more conviction I feel. Why? Because I realize what it says, and I see that it says this is where I need to be living, and I'm probably way down here on whatever level that is, and it'd be easy to water this gospel down to make it more palatable. But we're to remain faithful to the message that Yahweh has given to us. Verse 6, it says, we didn't seek glory from men or from you or for others, that we could have made demands. He said, we didn't care about what you said. Like over there in Acts 4, where it says, we don't really care. We're not trying to please you. We're trying to please God in what we do. And here he says that we've been approved and been entrusted. What a great privilege and responsibility for a believer. Boy, and if you can wrap your mind around any words that I say today, that might be the words for you to do it. It's a privilege and a responsibility for us to be approved and to be entrusted with the gospel message. So, accept the mission. We have the method. We're going to be honest. We're going to be faithful. All those things. Lastly, this is what I'll say, and I'll try to finish for the morning. Consider an effective ministry in our lives. We need to use the right motivation. We need to use the right motivation. Look at verse 7 and 8. I love this. What a great picture. He had just said, we didn't seek glory from you, or we didn't make demands, although we could have, he said. Verse 7, and then he says this, but we were gentle among you, just as a nursing mother cherishes her own children. So, affectionately longing for you, we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel, he says, but also our own lives for this reason, because you had become dear to us. If you're interested in what the motivation for the gospel is, it's love. This is what should motivate us to want to go out into the world around us. It's love. And boy, we can get it twisted sometimes, because sometimes we really don't know what that word means. If you look about 2 paragraphs forward in your Bible, 1 Thessalonians 3 and 12, he says, and may Elohim make you to increase and abound in love to one another and to all, just as we do to you. Boy, here's a motivation for us to go out of this place and share the gospel. It's if we loved people enough. If we just loved people enough, we wouldn't have to be told to do the right thing, would we? If we loved Yahweh enough, we wouldn't have to be told to do the right thing. That's why Yeshua said, when the greatest commandment, that you love the Lord God with all your heart and soul and your neighbor as yourself. If we could get those 2 parts right, then we would be right. But boy, sometimes it's hard. And by the way, Yeshua said a lot of things about love that I don't necessarily agree with and I don't necessarily like, when he talked about things like loving your enemy and going the extra mile and turning the other cheek and all those. Y'all know what I'm talking about? All of those things all those things go against who I am sometimes, because we're still in the flesh and we're fighting it. And it is a battle sometimes. Romans 7, that's what Paul said. He said it's like a battle raging in my members. It is, and every day I want to get up and fight. But when it comes to loving neighbors or loving enemies and going the extra mile and turning the other cheek and all those things, listen, the truth is, for me, sometimes I struggle with that issue. I'm the person who needs a t-shirt that says, I like dogs and like 4 people, or something like that. Y'all ever seen those? But I pray, Jessica, that Yahweh will soften my heart. I pray that He soften my heart, because I know that the motivating factor for me in ministry of any kind is love for people. And boy, we need to forget that. And by the way, that is why we do what we do. We share the gospel. But there's more than that. We should be loving on one another and supporting one another and lifting one another up over and over and over. He said, I'd pray that the Lord would increase and abound in love to you, not only to one another, but listen, and to all. That means the brethren and those outside. That does include, by the way, people who are different from me, people who look different from me, people who are different colors from me, people who have a different language from me. And here's what I'm saying to you. It's easy for us to love people who are like us. Isn't it? It's easy to love people who are like us. It's easy to love people who think the way that we do, who worship the way that we do, who do all the things that we do. But boy, sometimes it's hard for me to love people who are different. But Paul said here, and I think this is such a beautiful picture. He said, but we were gentle among you, as a nursing mother cherishes her own children. And I can't think of a more beautiful picture of love and care and security and all of those things that are encompassed in that. He said, we were gentle among you as a nursing mother cherishes her own children. Listen, that's the kind of love that we need. Not a demanding kind of love, but a giving kind of love. Anybody agree with that? A giving kind of love. Gentle, not abusive, not rude. A love that lifts people up. A love, by the way, this nursing mother, this is a love that's literally feeding into the lives of other people. And boy, that's the kind of love that we need to have, I think. Said we're affectionately longing. We want the best for you. That's what that means. We're affectionately longing. We want the best for you. We want to see you be successful. And by the way, what a great picture, of personal ministry, if you would. We're well pleased to impart this to you. He says, not only the gospel, he says, but notice this part, but also our own lives, because you had become dear to us. Not only the gospel, but he said our own lives. People don't, here's what I know this, I know that people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And boy, until we start investing in one another and investing in people who are different from us as far as the gospel message goes, wow, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And here's the result of that love. Look, he said, man, we loved you like this. And he said, affectionately long for you. We want the best for you. We're investing our own lives in you. And then he said, because you'd become dear to us. Because you'd become dear to us. We've been an active part of this assembly for over a year and a half now. I mean, we're getting pretty close to 2 years. And here's what I know. I know as I look out at you today, and I know there's others here, who are not here right now. You people have become dear to me in a year and a half. Love, affection, whatever it is, grows over time. And particularly in this culture, where we're coming together like this every day, we are a faith family, and we need to love one another, and I pray that we do, and we need to invest in one another's lives. And, I think about the people who have invested your lives in mine in the last year and a half that I've been here, and I'm so thankful for that. And because of that, you've become dear to me. And that's the motivation for what we do and for why we go and for the gospel or whatever it is that we do. Here's the motivation. It's in how we love one another. And I pray that Yahweh would give me his eyes to see people the way they are, and I could have that kind of love. The Bible talks about that agape love, and that's hard for us to understand, but that's a love that benefits the recipient. And that's the kind of love that we have for ministry is going to be effective, and I pray that it would. And so pray that this has been a blessing to you, and that you'd have a great afternoon. And with that, I'll close. Thank you so very much.